She thought she could drive a cement truck across my hand-built bridge. She was wrong. At first, it was just tire tracks, small ones. But then one night, my security alert went off. When I checked the footage, I saw it, Karen, the HOA president, behind the wheel of a roaring cement truck, headlights blazing, wheels tearing through my property like it was hers. Hit subscribe, and watch what happens when HOA power meets real payback. That bridge wasn't just wood and bolts, it was mine, something I'd built plank by plank. And she just crushed it for HOA convenience. So I smiled, took a deep breath, and said to myself, "All right, Karen. You like driving over my bridge? Let's see how you handle what's waiting underneath it next time." It started with something simple. A project I built with pride, a little wooden bridge over the creek that cut through my property. It wasn't just a crossing, it was a symbol of everything I loved about living outside the city. Peace, self-reliance, and the satisfaction of knowing every inch of land beneath my feet was mine. I remember the first day I began building it. The sun was just starting to rise over the pines, casting golden streaks through the mist. My dog Max watched from the bank as I measured, sawed, and hammered for hours. I wanted something rustic but sturdy, something that could handle my pickup, maybe the ATV, but definitely not something like what was about to come. Each plank was pressure-treated pine, sanded and stained to a warm honey color. I added metal braces underneath for strength, sunk the posts deep into the creek bed, and finished it off with a handrail on each side. It wasn't perfect, a few boards sat uneven, and sometimes after a storm, I'd have to replace a loose nail or two, but it was solid. When it was done, I'd stand at the middle of that bridge, listening to the creek trickle beneath, feeling the gentle sway under my boots, and I'd think this is what peace feels like. That peace lasted almost 2 years. Then one morning, it vanished, just like that. It was a Saturday. Early. The kind of morning where the air still felt cool and the dew clung to every blade of grass. I was sipping coffee on my porch when I noticed something strange down by the creek. Deep, dark grooves carved into the soil on both sides of the bridge. At first, I thought maybe one of the neighbor's landscapers had driven too close. But when I got closer, my stomach sank. The tire tracks weren't from a small truck or SUV, they were massive. Wide. Heavy. I crouched down, touching the dirt. It was still moist, fresh. Then I looked at the bridge. The boards were splintered in places, the handrail cracked in the middle, and one of the supporting beams underneath had shifted slightly. It looked like something had crushed the bridge and just barely made it across. "What in the?" I muttered. That's when I remembered the best investment I'd ever made, my security cameras. I'd installed a few around the property, one facing the creek in case of wildlife or trespassers. I went back to the house, pulled up the footage on my phone, and fast-forwarded through the night. And then, there it was. The timestamp read 3:47 a.m. Headlights appeared on the far side of the creek, bouncing slightly as a massive cement truck rumbled into frame. The thing looked completely out of place, like a dinosaur stomping through a meadow. I leaned closer, squinting at the screen. The truck slowed down, idled for a moment, then began inching forward across the bridge. The planks strained visibly under the weight, the whole thing bowing as the rear tires crossed. But it wasn't just the truck that made my blood boil. It was the person behind the wheel. Even through the glare of the headlights, I recognized her, that stiff posture, that bob haircut, that pearl necklace glinting under the dashboard light. Karen. The self-appointed queen of the neighborhood. President of the HOA. The same woman who once tried to fine me for using non-regulation mailbox paint, even though my property technically wasn't under HOA jurisdiction. I watched her on the footage, calm as ever, like she owned the place. She stopped at the end of the bridge, rolled down her window, and waved another truck behind her to wait. Then, like she was directing a parade, she motioned them forward, pointing down my driveway. That's when I paused the video and just sat there, silent. She'd done it before. Not like this, of course. Not something so blatant. But Karen always had this habit of pushing limits. She'd leave flyers on my gate demanding community contributions. She'd scold my delivery drivers for parking incorrectly. Once, she even complained about the unapproved sound of my lawnmower. But driving a cement truck across my private bridge? That was a new level of audacity. I replayed the clip again, this time slower. The camera picked up every detail, the grinding noise of the tires, the creak of the wood, the faint splash of displaced water below. When the truck reached the far side, I could even hear Karen laughing and saying something to the driver, though the audio was too fuzzy to catch the words. I took a deep breath and exhaled slowly. I wasn't the kind of person who liked confrontation. I moved out here for space, for quiet. But this was beyond disrespect. This was destruction. I walked down to the bridge again, checking every plank. One section near the middle had deep cracks forming along the grain. Another was slightly warped. The bolts I'd tightened months ago were now bent out of alignment. If another truck crossed it, the entire bridge might collapse. That thought made my jaw tighten. I looked across the creek, toward the HOA managed road, the one Karen constantly called her road. She must have thought that because it connected to my land, it gave her free access. But legally, it didn't. My bridge was the boundary, a literal line she had no right to cross. And yet she had. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the footage in my head, the truck, the sound, Karen's smug face illuminated by the dashboard glow. It wasn't just a broken bridge anymore. It was a broken boundary. The next morning, I decided I was going to confront her. Not with anger, not yet, but with evidence. I printed stills from the footage, circled her face in red marker, and set the images on my kitchen table. As I looked at them, I could feel that familiar slow burn in my chest, not rage exactly, but something sharper. Determination. Because if Karen thought she could treat my property like her personal shortcut, she was about to learn otherwise. And if she wanted to keep driving her trucks across my bridge, well, then I'd build something for her to drive into. Something she'd never see coming. By the next morning, my calm had worn thin. I'd spent the whole night staring at that footage, rewinding, zooming, watching Karen's smug grin as if she'd accomplished something noble. Every time I replayed it, my bridge seemed to groan in my memory, like it was crying out for help. I wasn't about to let it go. So I grabbed my phone, printed a few photos from the security footage, and marched straight toward the HOA office. It wasn't far, just down the road, tucked into a manicured cul-de-sac with flower beds that probably cost more than my entire bridge. When I got there, Karen was already outside, clipboard in hand, barking orders at two landscapers. Even from a distance, her voice carried, sharp, clipped, and dripping with authority that she thought she actually had. "Karen," I called out. She turned, one eyebrow raised, like I'd interrupted a royal decree. "Oh, good morning," she said, forcing a smile that didn't touch her eyes. "Can I help you with something, neighbor?" I held up the pictures. "You sure can. Mind explaining why there was a cement truck on my private bridge at 3:47 in the morning?" The landscapers froze. Karen's fake smile faltered for a second, just long enough to tell me she knew exactly what I was talking about. But then she recovered, straightened her shoulders, and said, "Oh, that. It's part of the new HOA landscaping project. We needed to get to the East Trail access. Through my property?" I shot back. She rolled her eyes. "Technically, the HOA maintains easement access through certain parts of the neighborhood. Your little bridge isn't part of the HOA," I interrupted, my tone sharper than I intended. "It's on my deed, on my land. You had no right to use it." Karen gave a small, condescending laugh. "Oh, come on. Don't be dramatic. It's just a bridge, and it's not like it broke." I clenched my jaw. It cracked. And that truck could have collapsed it, with the driver inside. You know how dangerous that was? She waved a dismissive hand. "It's a wooden bridge, dear. You should have built it stronger if you didn't want it used. Besides, we're improving the neighborhood. That new path will increase everyone's property values, including yours." The audacity in her tone made my blood pressure spike. She wasn't apologetic. She wasn't even pretending to be sorry. She was proud of herself, like she'd done something for the greater good. "Karen," I said slowly, trying to keep my voice level, "you drove a 40,000-pound cement truck across a bridge designed for small vehicles. You could have destroyed it. That's private property damage." Her fake smile vanished for real this time. Her lips thinned, and her eyes hardened. "Don't threaten me," she said coldly. "If you want to talk about property, maybe we should bring this up at the next HOA board meeting. I'm sure everyone would love to hear how you're blocking community access." I blinked. Community access? That creek is my boundary line. You don't own an inch past it. She crossed her arms. That's debatable. It's not, I said, pulling out my phone and showing her a digital copy of the property survey. Right here. Clear as day. She didn't even look. You can show whatever maps you want. The HOA has rights to ensure all homeowners have safe and efficient routes. We're within our authority. That's when I realized something important. She wasn't just clueless. She was convinced. She had built this little empire in her head, one where she ruled over every inch of land, every fence, every blade of grass. I took a step closer. If that truck crosses my bridge again, I'll call the sheriff. You're trespassing. And this, I pointed to the photo in my hand, is proof. Karen didn't flinch. She just smirked, leaned slightly toward me, and said, "Good luck with that. You think the police are going to side with you over me? I'm the HOA president. We've been improving this area for years. You're the only one who's ever complained." That line hit hard, not because it was true, but because I realized it was her weapon. She relied on intimidation. She knew most homeowners wouldn't stand up to her. They'd just sigh, pay their bogus fines, repaint their mailboxes, and hope she'd move on. But I wasn't most homeowners. I stepped back, took a deep breath, and said evenly, "You just admitted to trespassing and property damage. So thank you, this conversation's being recorded." Karen's smugness cracked for just a moment. "You're recording me?" I pointed to the phone in my pocket. Dashcam, always on when I drive. You'd be surprised what it picks up. She glared at me, then turned to the landscapers. "Go ahead and start the next section," she snapped. Then to me, in a lower tone, "You'll regret making this a big deal. The HOA can make life very inconvenient for you." I smiled slightly. "You already have." As I walked away, I could feel her eyes burning holes in my back. I didn't need to turn around to know she was fuming, not because she was right, but because someone had finally called her bluff. By the time I got home, my frustration had turned into focus. I replayed her words over and over. "It's just a bridge." That's what she said. That bridge she didn't build, didn't pay for, didn't even respect. Well, if she thought it was just a bridge, then maybe I could turn it into something more, something that would make her think twice before trespassing again. I opened my toolbox and looked over the blueprints I'd used to design the original bridge. I wasn't sure what I was going to build yet, but I knew one thing for certain: the next time she tried to use it, she'd regret it. When I first saw Karen's message sitting in my inbox, I thought it was some kind of joke. The subject line read, "Unauthorized structure violation, immediate action required." I opened it, and my stomach dropped. The letter was an official HOA notice, complete with their logo, seal, and Karen's smug digital signature at the bottom. It claimed that my bridge, the same bridge I'd built a decade ago, was an unapproved structure crossing community-managed waterways. The email said I had 7 days to dismantle it or face daily fines and possible legal action. I couldn't believe it. This was my land. That creek didn't even belong to the HOA. It was a natural runoff that ran through my property, mapped and recorded long before the subdivision was ever built. But Karen didn't care about that. I called her number right away. She picked up after 2 rings, her voice dripping with that false politeness she used whenever she was about to do something awful. "Good morning, Mr. Thompson," she said. "I see you received our compliance notice. I hope you'll act quickly to avoid penalties." "Penalties?" I snapped. "Karen, that bridge has been there for years, and it's not even on HOA property. You have no right—" "Oh, we'll see about that," she interrupted smoothly. "The HOA board has already decided. That bridge interferes with the natural flow of community resources. Our construction team needs access for maintenance." "Maintenance?" I repeated. "You mean the cement trucks that keep tearing up my land?" There was a pause. Then, in a voice like sugar-coated venom, she said, "If you'd like to discuss this further, I suggest you attend the next HOA board meeting. We'll be happy to explain our position there." And with that, she hung up. I stared at the phone, furious. She wanted me to show up, not for discussion, but for public humiliation. That's how Karen operated. She loved the crowd, loved to twist the story until everyone thought she was the hero. Fine, I thought. 2 can play that game. Over the next few days, I did my homework. I pulled up my property records, waterway maps, and construction permits from when I'd built the bridge years ago. Everything was legal. My land extended 5 feet past the creek on both sides. Still, the next morning, I noticed a fresh set of tire marks. I checked the cameras. Another cement truck, different company, same route, same destination, rolling right over my bridge without permission. I watched the footage of the boards bowing under the weight, creaking dangerously, and I knew it couldn't take much more. I went down there myself. The ground was torn up like a battlefield. The truck had even spilled some of its mix, leaving hardened gray clumps along my grass. I followed the ruts back to the road, and who was standing there in a bright orange vest with a clipboard? Karen. "Good afternoon," she said sweetly when she saw me coming. "We're just conducting some necessary maintenance on the community infrastructure. Nothing to worry about." "You can't use my bridge," I said, pointing to it. "That's private property." Karen tilted her head, feigning confusion. "Private property? Oh, I think you'll find that bridge is within the HOA's jurisdiction now. We've expanded the easement area for safety reasons." "Without telling me?" "Not my job to tell you, Mr. Thompson." The board voted unanimously. That was when I noticed the 2 men standing behind her, both wearing company uniforms. One of them was holding a stack of papers, apparently work orders for the cement trucks. Karen had somehow convinced a construction crew that they had permission to cross my land. I snapped pictures of everything: the trucks, the ruts, her clipboard, even the license plates. When I raised my phone, Karen's smile finally cracked. "Recording me without consent," she said sharply. "That's a violation of Community Code Section 14B. I laughed. "You're trespassing and destroying private property, and you're worried about a community code?" Her eyes narrowed. "Careful, Mr. Thompson. Defiance like that doesn't reflect well on residents who want to stay in good standing." That's when I realized something deeper was going on. This wasn't just about the bridge, it was about power. Karen was trying to make a statement. To show everyone that she ran the neighborhood, even if it meant bending the law. That night, I reviewed the camera footage again, every second of it. I backed it up on multiple drives and sent a copy to my lawyer friend Jacob, who'd worked on property disputes before. His response came back within minutes: "They're violating easement boundaries and trespassing. Don't touch the bridge for now. Document everything. I'll draft a cease and desist." Perfect. The next day, a shiny HOA envelope appeared in my mailbox again, this time taped shut like it contained nuclear codes. Inside, Karen had doubled the fines. "Failure to comply will result in escalation," it read. But instead of fear, I felt calm. Because I had a plan. If Karen wanted to play games on my bridge, she was about to step into one she wouldn't win. That evening, as the sun set over the creek, I stood there staring at my damaged handiwork. The boards creaked gently in the breeze, reflecting orange in the water below. Karen thought she could bully me, use HOA rules to trample over common sense. But I wasn't about to let her, not after everything I'd built here. I smiled to myself, already picturing what I'd do next. If she wanted to keep driving cement trucks across my bridge, then I'd build something she'd never forget. That night, I couldn't sleep. The sound of the creek outside my window used to calm me, but now it just reminded me of Karen's trucks crushing everything I'd worked for. I stared at the ceiling, my mind spinning through ideas, not just about revenge, but about justice. See, Karen's the type who only understands consequences when they're loud, obvious, and impossible to ignore. She'd stomped all over my rights, lied about property lines, and dared to weaponize her HOA title against me. So I decided I'd fight her the same way, not with shouting or threats, but with something smarter. A trap. By morning, I had the entire plan mapped out. I wasn't going to damage her trucks or do anything illegal that would only play into her hands. No, I wanted her caught red-handed, with undeniable proof of trespassing and property destruction. And the best part? She wouldn't even know she was walking into it. The first step was upgrading the cameras. The old security system I'd installed 5 years ago was decent, motion-triggered, HD with night vision, but I wanted better. So I replaced the corner cameras with new 4K models and added 2 hidden ones under the eaves near the bridge. One faced the creek directly, while the other captured the license plates and drivers' faces. Then, I set up a pressure sensor system. I built it out of materials I had lying around, a few pressure mats from an old security project, some wiring, and a transmitter linked to my phone. Whenever a heavy vehicle crossed the bridge, it would ping my phone instantly and record a timestamp. By mid-afternoon, my setup was complete. I stood back and admired my work. It looked just like any normal bridge, only smarter. Then I went to town and met up with Jacob, my lawyer friend. He'd already drafted the cease and desist letter, airtight and loaded with legal weight. It cited property line violations, trespassing, and environmental damage, and included still frames from the first cement truck incident. Jacob handed me the document and said, "Once you serve this, they have to stop immediately. But I bet she'll ignore it." "Oh, she will," I said with a smirk. And that's when the real fun begins. I returned home and printed 3 copies, one for the HOA, one for the construction company, and one for Karen personally. I hand-delivered hers the next morning. She was outside, pruning her roses like she was queen of the cul-de-sac. "Morning, Karen," I said, holding out the envelope. She looked at it, then at me, like I was delivering bad news she couldn't pretend not to understand. "What's this?" "A cease and desist. You're trespassing on my property. You and your trucks are to stay off my bridge, effective immediately." Her fake smile returned, tighter this time. "Mr. Thompson, you seem confused. That bridge," I cut her off, "is mine. And the next time one of your trucks crosses it, you'll be explaining yourself to a judge, not your little board of cronies." She blinked, caught off guard by my tone. Then, with a forced chuckle, she said, "You really think you can scare me with paperwork? Cute." I leaned in just enough to make my point clear. "No, Karen. I'm not scaring you. I'm warning you." Then I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there, gripping that envelope like it might bite her. For 2 days, things were quiet. No trucks, no noise, no fresh tire marks. I almost thought she'd backed down. But deep down, I knew Karen too well. She never let anyone else win. On the 3rd morning, at 7:42 a.m., my phone buzzed. "Bridge alert, pressure triggered." I jumped out of bed, grabbed my boots, and sprinted outside. From the top of my driveway, I could already hear the deep growl of a diesel engine. Another cement truck, this one bright yellow, was crawling down the path toward my bridge. Behind it, Karen's silver Lexus rolled up slowly, her window down as she barked directions into her phone. I crouched behind the tree line and watched as the truck eased forward, its heavy tires sinking into the damp soil. The moment its front wheels hit the bridge, the wood groaned under the strain. Karen stood on the far side, arms folded, wearing that smug, satisfied smirk like she'd already won. That's when I hit record. The cameras captured everything: her, the driver, the truck's company logo, even the time and date. And when the rear tires hit the pressure plate I'd hidden under the last plank, my phone pinged again, timestamped to the second. I smiled. The evidence was perfect. Then came the sound I'd been waiting for. Crack. Not enough to break anything serious. I'd reinforced the underside beams the night before so it wouldn't collapse, but just enough to scare the driver. He slammed the brakes, jumped out, and started yelling, "Lady, this bridge ain't safe. We're gonna bust through it." Karen looked stunned, then furious. She started shouting at him to keep going, claiming the HOA had authorized everything. But the driver wasn't having it. He pointed to the big sign I'd posted that morning: "Private property. Trespassers will be reported. Cameras recording." I stepped out from the trees right then, slow and calm, holding my phone up. "Smile for the camera, Karen," I said. Her face went white. "You think you're clever," she hissed, glancing at the truck driver, who was already backing away. "You can't use this footage. You're violating privacy laws." "Actually," I said, "I'm protecting my property. You're the one violating the law, and you just gave me all the proof I need." For the first time since this whole mess started, she didn't have a comeback. She just stood there shaking, watching as I walked up and took a wide, sweeping video of the entire scene: truck, bridge, her, everything. By the time I headed back to the house, I was already emailing the footage to Jacob. That night, I got a text from him that made me grin. "Nice work. This isn't just a civil case anymore. This could go federal: property damage, unauthorized access, possibly fraud if she forged permits." I sat back in my chair, letting the weight of it sink in. Karen had no idea that her obsession with control was about to turn into her own downfall. And the next step of my plan? Let's just say, the trap was only getting tighter. The next morning felt different, lighter, somehow. I'd slept like a log for the first time in weeks, the kind of sleep that comes after you do something right. The tension that had lived under my skin all month finally loosened, just enough for me to think clearly. By 9 a.m., my inbox was a tiny war zone of emails. Jacob had sent an update. He'd filed a formal complaint and attached my footage, the photos of the truck, and the property survey. He suggested we call the county code enforcement and the sheriff, and he'd be ready to issue papers if they wanted to press charges. I called the sheriff first. It wasn't dramatic, just a calm phone call, stating facts, ticking boxes, date, time, truck ID, driver name, and that the HOA had repeatedly crossed the boundary despite notices. The dispatcher's voice was polite, and then she said the words I had been hoping for. "We'll send someone out to document the damage and speak with all involved." That afternoon, a squad car rolled up like an answer to prayer. 2 deputies, solid and no nonsense, walked the creek, examined the bridge, and then asked to see my videos. I handed over my phone and watched the footage with my stomach clenched. They took notes, asked questions, and didn't flinch at Karen's name. After reviewing everything, the senior deputy looked at me and said, "We'll be filing a trespass and property damage report. We'll also contact the trucking company and the HOA to get their side." When the deputies left, I felt vindicated, not giddy, but validated. The next step was to let the law do its job while I kept documenting and staying smart. Word traveled fast. By that evening, a small crowd had gathered on the street near the bridge, neighbors whispering, kids pointing, and a few of Karen's supporters glaring from across the cul-de-sac. Most people had been watching the drama with that guilty voyeuristic curiosity only small towns have. They love the spectacle, especially when the queen is wobbling. Karen did not show for the deputy's initial visit. Instead, she sent Dale and 2 other HOA board members in her place. Dale arrived with the kind of practiced outrage politicians cultivate: a neat suit, a rehearsed look of concern, and a tiny pile of paperwork he clearly hoped would make him look official. I met them at the bridge, arms folded. Dale thrust forward a slick, laminated letter and announced loudly, "On behalf of the HOA, we contest any allegations of unlawful activity. We have easements and rights-of-way that authorize access for maintenance." I pointed at the bridge and handed the deputy a copy of my survey. "These easements don't cross this property, and you can see the deed. If you have permits, show them now." Dale fumbled through his papers, his face flushing. Someone in the small crowd muttered, "Looks like a bluff." The deputy watched Dale's attempts to produce a permit with patient skepticism. He radioed it in, then turned to Dale and said plainly, "We'll verify those permits. In the meantime, no vehicles on private property." The weeks after that moved like slow, methodical chess, every small action deliberate, every step documented. Jacob filed a formal cease and desist, then a stronger notice when the trucks kept coming. The county code enforcement placed a temporary hold on that stretch of road while they investigated. The trucking company, when contacted, claimed miscommunication and said they would stop until the issue was resolved. Karen's tone shifted once the county became involved. The smugness thinned, replaced by a brittle energy that made her seem both smaller and far more dangerous. She started posting official notices around the neighborhood again, but their tone had changed, less bossy, more defensive. There were whispers that she'd been receiving calls from people in higher positions, calls that made her pace at night and mutter obscenely into the phone. Then came the morning the sheriff's office called me. Someone had filed a criminal complaint against Karen, reckless endangerment and trespassing. The paperwork was crisp and clinical. It wasn't a theater, it was the law clicking into place. She'd driven heavy equipment over private property, damaged it, and ignored multiple warnings. That was not trivial. I sat at my kitchen table as Jacob explained the legal path forward. "They'll probably issue a summons," he said. "If the HOA wants to fight, they can. But the evidence is," he paused, looking at me with an expression I didn't want to see, "substantial." The summons did come. She was served with a notice to appear and a list of complaints attached. I won't pretend I didn't feel a sting of satisfaction. But justice felt sterile when it was only paperwork. What mattered more was the message it sent: you can't break things and expect to get away with it just because you wear a title. Karen retaliated in smaller, blurred ways. She sent out emails accusing me of harassment for filming, warning neighbors that I was running a personal vendetta. She tried to smear me in the HOA newsletter she still controlled. But each time she opened her mouth, I had video, timestamps, and witnesses, and the more she spoke, the more people saw through it. Unexpectedly, a few of her longtime supporters began to waver. I caught Mrs. Delgado, who used to nod at everything Karen said, at the post office one morning, saying quietly, "I always thought she was strict, but this is wrong." Small cracks in a carefully built facade are the most fun to watch. The HOA called an emergency board meeting to respond to the deputy's involvement and the pending summons. The meeting was tense, underlit, and full of people who suddenly didn't look as confident as they used to. I expected the room to be split, but what I got was better. Several members publicly questioned Karen's judgment. Dale scowled and stammered. Others muttered about how dangerous it was to risk people's safety and property for the sake of a shortcut. That evening, Karen tried a last-ditch effort. She insisted the board back her up publicly and signed a press-style statement claiming the trucks were essential for safety upgrades. The statement read like a press release from a group that had lost all touch with reality, tone-deaf and hollow. One board member refused to sign. The vote to suspend Karen from her duties, temporarily at first, was close, but the voices calling for accountability won. The board suspended her pending the sheriff's investigation. The room was too quiet for a moment, then erupted. Some applauded, some scowled, and a few people simply stared blankly, stunned. Karen, when told, went pale and then furious. Later, I learned she had called the county commissioner, screeched about betrayal, and demanded reinstatement. No luck. Bureaucracy moved in its heavy, slow way, and the law had a patience she clearly did not. When the dust settled that week, the trucks stopped coming. My bridge, bruised but intact thanks to my reinforcements, had effectively become off-limits. The deputies did more rounds. Jacob drew up stronger protective orders. The HOA membership began discussing formal changes to bylaws and oversight. My triumph wasn't about humiliating Karen in public. It was about enforcing a truth: property, respect, and the rule of law still matter. That bridge had been more than wood and nails. It had become a boundary marker for common sense. As I stood at the middle of it one evening, listening to the creak again, I allowed myself a small private smile. The trap hadn't been a trap to injure anyone, it had been a test. And Karen failed spectacularly. I knew, though, that people like her don't always go quietly. The law had stepped in, yes, but sometimes power finds another way to claw back. For the first time since this started, I felt something else beyond satisfaction: cautious vigilance. The next chapter in this mess was still unwritten, and I wasn't about to let my guard down. For a brief, beautiful week, peace returned. No trucks, no shouting, no threats tucked under my windshield wipers. The only sounds were the rustle of wind through the trees and the soft gurgle of the creek under my bridge. I thought maybe, just maybe, it was over. But people like Karen don't fade quietly. They retreat, lick their wounds, and plan something worse. It started small whispers in the neighborhood, strange looks from people who used to wave. One morning, I went to grab my mail and found 3 envelopes shoved into my box. They weren't from the county, or the sheriff, or any official body. They were anonymous notes. The first said, "Stop harassing Karen. You're turning the neighborhood against you." The second, "We don't want troublemakers here. Move out before things get ugly." And the third, written in sloppy, almost childish handwriting, simply said, "You'll regret crossing her." I stood there on my driveway, holding those letters, feeling the sun on my back and the slow rise of anger in my chest. Not fear, anger. Because these weren't from random neighbors. They were from her circle, the same handful of loyal followers who believed the HOA made them powerful. That night, I installed 2 new cameras at the end of my driveway and repositioned the motion sensors toward the mail post. If they wanted to play dirty, I'd record every move. The following morning, something even stranger happened. I walked out to find bright orange flags staked along my property line, the kind contractors used to mark underground utilities. They formed a perfect path from the HOA road right up to the creek. It didn't take a genius to figure out what that meant. Someone was planning to dig again, maybe to lay new pipes or pave access without permission. Within an hour, I was on the phone with the county office. The woman on the line pulled up the system and said, "There's no new permit request in your area." Of course there wasn't. I thanked her, hung up, and stared at those flags like they were enemy markers in a war zone. Karen was back, all right, and this time she was trying to play clever. That evening, I caught her. It was just after sunset. I was sitting in my living room when my phone buzzed. One of the cameras had picked up motion near the bridge. I tapped the feed and nearly laughed out loud. There she was. Karen. Hoodie, gloves, flashlight in hand, moving from flag to flag and planting small stakes with neon tape, muttering to herself like some twisted surveyor. I watched for almost 2 minutes, recording everything. Then I called the sheriff's non-emergency line. "Yep," I said calmly, "it's her again. Trespassing, vandalizing, and marking land that isn't hers. I've got her on camera." They said they'd send a deputy to check it out. By the time the patrol car rolled down the road 20 minutes later, Karen had already fled. But she'd left enough evidence behind: the stakes, her tire marks, even a set of boot prints in the soft dirt by the bridge. The deputy photographed everything, took a brief statement, and promised to file an addendum to her case. Word of the incident spread like wildfire. The next HOA meeting was chaos. Half the members were fed up with Karen's antics, the other half defended her blindly, shouting about property improvements and community safety. But this time, something shifted. The board couldn't hide behind her anymore, not after she'd been suspended. I decided to attend the meeting myself. When I walked in, the room went silent. Karen wasn't there, but her influence lingered in every glare, every whispered comment. Dale, trying to regain control, cleared his throat and said, "Mr. Thompson, we're aware of recent allegations. Perhaps it's best if..." I cut him off. "Allegations? You mean evidence. Because I've got the footage right here." I connected my phone to the projector, and in seconds, the screen showed Karen sneaking around the property line. Her face, caught in high definition, looked pale and frantic in the flashlight's glare. The room exploded, gasps, murmurs, a few people swearing under their breath. Dale turned red. One of the board members stood and said sharply, "This has gone too far. She's putting us all at risk." Within minutes, a motion was made to remove her from the HOA presidency permanently. This time, no one stopped it. The vote was nearly unanimous. Karen was officially stripped of her authority. But victory didn't feel sweet, not yet. Because something told me she wasn't done. The next day, I noticed her car parked halfway down the street. She wasn't supposed to be near HOA property while under investigation, but there she was, sitting behind the wheel, just watching. Her sunglasses hid her eyes, but her smirk was unmistakable. The kind of smile that said, "You think this is over?" Later that afternoon, Jacob called. "Good news first," he said. "The county ruled in your favor. The HOA had no jurisdiction to use or modify the bridge. It's officially recorded in the deed. They can't touch it." I exhaled in relief. Finally, some legal ground solid enough to stand on. "Bad news?" I asked. He sighed. "Karen's filed a harassment complaint, says you've been stalking her, recording her illegally, and intimidating her. It won't stick, but it's designed to waste your time." I rubbed my temples. Of course she did. She can't fight clean, so she throws mud. He chuckled grimly. "She's cornered, and cornered people do stupid things. Don't react. Let her hang herself with her own rope." That night, I sat by the bridge again, the moonlight glinting off the water. The air was still, too still, the kind of calm that only comes before another storm. My phone pinged again, a camera alert. Not near the bridge this time. At my garage. The feed loaded, and my stomach dropped. Karen was there again, this time, not with flags or tools. She was trying to pry open the side door with a crowbar. Her car idled in the driveway, headlights off, her movements frantic. I couldn't believe it. She'd gone from petty revenge to full-blown criminal trespass. My hand shook as I called 911. "This is urgent," I said, forcing my voice steady. "The woman under an active investigation. She's on my property right now trying to break into my garage." The dispatcher told me to stay inside and stay safe. Outside, Karen froze as distant sirens started to echo through the hills. She looked up toward my camera, and for a split second, our eyes met through the screen. Her face twisted into something cold and unrecognizable. Then she bolted, jumped into her car, and sped off into the night. The deputies arrived minutes later, combing the area, but she was gone. Still, they had the footage. the crowbar marks, the tire tracks. And the report now carried a new charge: attempted breaking and entering. The aftershocks of that night would ripple through the entire neighborhood, and through Karen's life, in ways none of us could have imagined. Because this time, she hadn't just crossed a bridge. She'd crossed the line. The next morning arrived calm and golden, birds singing, mist rising off the creek, and that faint hum of the neighborhood waking up. You'd never guess a storm was about to hit. I sat on my porch, sipping black coffee, pretending to read the paper. But my eyes were glued to the live CCTV feed on my tablet. The trap was set. It had taken me days to prepare. After the last cement truck crossing, I'd reinforced the bridge just enough to make it look safe, but hidden underneath, I'd built what I called a smart load trigger. A sensor system I designed years ago when I worked in structural engineering. It could detect exact vehicle weights and send me alerts in real time. More importantly, I had set up a hydraulic failsafe that would drop the middle planks, not enough to injure, but enough to make any heavy vehicle think twice before trying again. And right on cue, a rumble echoed down the dirt road. Through the camera, I saw it, another cement truck, same company, same arrogance. Only this time, 2 HOA board members were standing on the opposite side, waving it through like traffic cops. One of them was Karen. I could see her bright pink scarf fluttering in the wind, her arms crossed like she owned the place. She must have thought I'd given up. The truck slowed, hesitated, then rolled forward. My sensors pinged. 12,400 pounds. Too heavy. The system beeped 3 times, and the red warning light on my tablet flashed. Overload threshold reached. I took a slow sip of coffee and whispered, "Showtime." The front tires hit the bridge, creak. The middle section dipped slightly, groan. And then, with a loud crack and a sudden whoosh, the hydraulic release activated. The planks dropped about 8 inches, just enough to make the whole truck lurch and stop cold. Karen's voice came through the camera mic. "What was that?" "Keep going, you're fine." The driver wasn't so sure. He looked terrified, gripping the steering wheel. "Lady, this thing's not safe," he shouted out the window. Karen marched right up to the edge, still barking orders. "It's his fault. He's tampering with public property again. Just go." Then came the best part. The smart load system triggered my secondary alert, the automatic camera and siren system. Loudspeakers hidden under the bridge roared to life with a deep mechanical voice. "Warning, unauthorized vehicle detected. Bridge weight exceeded. Trespassing alert sent to authorities." The sound startled everyone. The driver panicked, slammed the brakes, and refused to move another inch. The HOA board members froze, their clipboards shaking. And Karen? She stumbled backward, nearly falling into the creek. I watched, trying not to laugh. She looked around wildly, shouting, "Who's saying that?" I decided it was time to make an appearance. I grabbed my jacket, strolled down to the bridge, and waved. "Morning, folks. Looks like my bridge doesn't appreciate the abuse." Karen's face turned red. "You can't do this. This is HOA property." I raised an eyebrow. "Really?" "Because the county registrar says this land, and that bridge, are on my parcel. Meaning, you're trespassing. Again." She sputtered, clearly out of arguments. "You can't scare people with fake alarms." I tapped the edge of the railing. "Fake? That system's connected directly to the county engineering office. They'll get the weight alert, and if I'm right, that truck's over the legal limit for residential load. Which means they'll be getting fined for damages, again." The driver turned pale. "Wait, what? I'm not paying for this." He threw the truck into reverse, tires squealing, and backed away from the bridge as if it were on fire. Karen shouted after him, but it was no use, he was gone. Her plan had crumbled right in front of her. For a moment, she just stood there, fists clenched, eyes blazing. "You think you've won?" she hissed. "You have no idea who you're messing with." I grinned. "I think I do, Karen. A woman who keeps confusing HOA rules with federal property law." She stormed off, stomping through the mud, leaving her expensive shoes ruined and her pride in pieces. As I watched her disappear down the road, I turned back to the bridge. My little trap had worked perfectly, no damage, no danger, just enough to send a message. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Karen didn't lose quietly. And judging by the phone calls she'd been making lately, I had a feeling she was planning something much bigger. Something that could finally push this fight from neighborhood drama into legal warfare. I took one last sip of coffee, the steam curling in the cold morning air. "Bring it on, Karen," I muttered. "You're about to learn what happens when you mess with an engineer." For the next few days, the neighborhood felt quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that comes before a storm. I knew Karen wasn't done. People like her never admit defeat. They regroup, replot, and come back swinging. The morning after the trap incident, I woke to find an envelope taped to my gate. No return address. Just bold letters scrawled across the front. Notice of violation. I laughed out loud. The HOA again. When I opened it, my amusement vanished. "You are hereby notified of multiple violations: unsafe construction on a public pathway, unauthorized alarm system creating a hostile neighborhood environment, obstruction of emergency access route, immediate removal required. Fine, $5,000. $5,000. For protecting my own bridge." She wasn't even subtle anymore. Karen had drafted the letter herself. I could tell from the grammar and that classic passive-aggressive tone she loved. The kicker? She'd CC'd the county engineering office. She wanted them involved, probably hoping to get me cited or forced to dismantle my bridge. "All right, Karen," I muttered, folding the paper neatly. "You want to play legal games? You picked the wrong opponent." See, she didn't know that before I retired, I spent 25 years as a civil and structural engineer for the state. I designed bridges, certified load limits, and approved road safety projects. I didn't just know the law, I wrote parts of the manual her HOA guidelines referenced. But instead of reacting, I decided to let her make the next move. And it came faster than I expected. 2 days later, I heard heavy machinery in the distance. When I looked through my binoculars, I nearly choked on my coffee. A full crew was parked at the far end of the road, orange vests, clipboards, and a bulldozer. At the center of it all, Karen, waving her arms like a general on the battlefield. I grabbed my phone and started recording. She was shouting something at the foreman, pointing toward my property. Then I heard her words through the wind. "We're tearing down that bridge today. It's a safety hazard." My jaw dropped. She'd actually hired a private construction team to demolish something on my land. I walked down calmly, camera rolling the whole time. As soon as she saw me, she put on her sweetest fake smile. "Oh, good morning. We're just making things safe for everyone." "On my property?" I asked. "It's part of the HOA easement," she lied confidently. "We have the right to maintain shared access routes." I handed her a copy of my property plat, printed in bold. "Wrong. The easement ends 20 feet before that bridge. You step 1 foot further, you're trespassing, and your crew's equipment becomes evidence." The foreman hesitated. "Ma'am, is this actually HOA land?" Karen waved him off. "Don't listen to him. He's just trying to intimidate us." Before I could respond, a county pickup truck rolled up. Out stepped a man in a hard hat, the same county inspector who'd certified my original design 3 years ago. "Well, morning, Mark," I said with a grin. Karen's face paled. He looked around, confused. "What's going on here?" Karen straightened up. "We've received reports of an unsafe bridge," Mark cut her off. "Unsafe? This bridge passed inspection with top marks. In fact, it's one of the few compliant private structures in this area." "Who reported this?" Karen's smile twitched. "Well, the HOA did. We're just following safety," he turned to me. "You installed the load sensors, right?" "Sure did," I said, tapping my phone. "Want to see the data?" I pulled up the log, every overload recorded, with timestamps. The truck entries, the warnings, even the system alert that went off when the cement truck crossed. Everything perfectly documented. Mark whistled. "That's solid evidence. Looks like the only unsafe behavior here was unauthorized heavy vehicle use. That's an HOA violation, not yours." Karen blinked. "Wait, what? That can't be right. He tampered with the..." He raised a hand. "Ma'am, you're lucky this isn't criminal trespass. You damaged a certified structure on private property. If he presses charges, your HOA could face civil penalties." The foreman quietly turned off the bulldozer and stepped away. "We're done here." Karen's voice cracked. "No. You can't just leave." I smiled politely. "Oh, they can. And as of now, I'll be sending the HOA a bill for the attempted destruction of private property, and legal fees." The inspector nodded. "You've got every right to." Then with a smirk he added, "Honestly, Karen, next time you try to pull a stunt like this, maybe check the parcel maps first." She stood there speechless as the crew packed up, muttering under their breath. A few neighbors had gathered on the sidewalk, whispering and recording the scene. By the time Karen realized she was being filmed, it was too late. The videos had already started spreading on the local Facebook page. By that evening, the post titled "HOA President Tries to Demolish Private Bridge, Gets Owned by County Inspector" had over 2,000 views. The comments were brutal. Finally, someone stood up to her. "She's been bullying this neighborhood for years. Karma Bridge strikes again." For the first time, Karen's power started to crack. Her voice lost its bite. Her calls to maintain order went ignored. And when she tried to find me again, half the board refused to sign off. The tide was turning, and I knew exactly how to finish what I started. But I wasn't going to just humiliate her publicly. No. I was going to dismantle her entire reign, legally, methodically, and by the book. Because if there's one thing I've learned, it's this: when you pick a fight with a man who built bridges for a living, he'll always find a way to make you fall through the cracks. By the time the next HOA meeting rolled around, the neighborhood was buzzing. Everyone had seen the video of Karen's bulldozer fiasco. It had made the rounds on every local Facebook group and even a few neighborhood TikToks. The title people loved the most? HOA Karen versus the bridge builder. Guess who won? I walked into the community center that evening not as a target, but as the man everyone suddenly respected. Karen, on the other hand, sat stiffly at the head of the table, pretending everything was fine. But her red-rimmed eyes and trembling hands told another story. The meeting started like usual, the same scripted introductions, the same hollow talk about community improvement. But when it came time for public comments, 3 hands shot up at once. "Karen," said one neighbor, "why did you order a demolition crew without HOA approval?" "That's misuse of funds," another chimed in. A third added, "You told us that bridge was illegal. Turns out you lied again." Karen's face turned pale as she stammered for words. I was trying to protect the neighborhood from unsafe," someone interrupted her. "No, you were trying to settle a personal grudge." I stood up slowly. "If I may," I said, my voice calm but firm. "Let's look at the facts." I laid down a folder filled with documents, the inspection reports, property maps, repair invoices, and photos of the damage her cement trucks had caused. The room fell silent as I slid a final page across the table, a certified complaint to the County Infrastructure Board, listing Karen's actions as intentional property interference and misuse of community authority. Karen blinked rapidly. You filed a complaint?" "Not just filed," I said. "It's been approved for review. Which means they'll be auditing every HOA transaction from the last 5 years." Gasps filled the room. One of the board members, a soft-spoken woman named Denise, turned on Karen. "You told us all of this was above board. That we didn't need to keep copies of certain invoices." Karen's composure shattered. I was just trying to make things easier." "Easier for who?" Denise snapped. "Because you've been signing off on reimbursements no one ever approved." The tension broke like a dam. People began shouting, demanding answers, waving their dues receipts, asking where all their beautification funds had gone. Karen's usual authority evaporated right before her eyes. I stepped back, letting the chaos unfold naturally. Justice didn't always come with sirens. Sometimes, it came from people finally opening their eyes. When the noise died down, I placed one last sheet on the table, a petition for leadership vote. It already had 20 signatures. More than half the neighborhood. Karen's mouth dropped open. "You can't," Denise cut her off. "We can. And we will." The vote was held right then and there. One by one, hands rose around the room. When the count ended, the result was clear: Karen was out. For a moment, she just sat there, frozen. Then she gathered her papers, muttering something about ungrateful neighbors, and stormed out the door. It slammed behind her with a finality that made the whole room exhale in relief. A neighbor leaned over and whispered, "She'll be gone for good this time, right?" I smiled faintly. "Let's just say, she won't be crossing any bridges for a while." Laughter rippled through the crowd. The mood lightened. For the first time in years, the HOA meeting actually felt like a community gathering, not a courtroom. In the following weeks, things started to change. The fines disappeared. The threats stopped. People started helping each other again. A few neighbors even volunteered to repair the flowerbeds Karen had neglected for years. As for my bridge, it became something of a neighborhood landmark. Kids would stop and take photos with it. Someone even made a little sign that read, "Karen's Crossing, closed for justice." Every time I crossed it, I couldn't help but smile. It wasn't just wood and nails anymore. It was proof that standing your ground with facts and patience can rebuild more than just a bridge. It can rebuild a whole community. One afternoon, I was on my porch when a familiar county truck pulled up. It was Mark, the inspector. "Came to check on the bridge," he said with a grin. "Still holding strong, huh?" "Stronger than ever," I replied. He handed me a new certification tag, bright gold. "We're labeling this one a model private crossing. Maybe it'll remind the next HOA president to stay on their side." We both laughed. As he drove off, I looked out over the creek, the water flowing steady beneath the bridge, sunlight dancing on its surface. Peace had finally returned. And somewhere I imagined Karen staring at that same video online, watching her empire crumble plank by plank, while the rest of us built something better. Because in the end, when you mess with a man who builds bridges, you end up burning your own. And that's how it ended. A bridge rebuilt, a neighborhood finally at peace, and an HOA president who learned the hard way that power only lasts as long as people let you keep it. Karen thought she could drive over me, literally. But in the end, she only buried herself. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you never miss what happens when HOA Karens push too far. Because on this channel, every rule-breaking HOA bully eventually meets real justice.